8 spine-chilling Craigslist horrors revealed, terrifying true stories that will haunt your sleep. Laura clutched her phone tightly, the cold metal digging into her palm as she read the ad that would change everything. Her heart raced. A local artist selling handmade toys for families, promising happiness she desperately needed. It felt like a siren-esque call, pulling her away from the chaos of her life as a single mother trying to scrape by. Tired of juggling 2 jobs and the weight of her recent divorce, she felt a flicker of hope that made the thought of surprising her son, Danny, with a new bicycle even more vivid. But Craigslist had its own agenda. What began as a simple childlike excitement quickly morphed into anxiety, the sinister undertones hidden like shadows lurking at the edges of her suburban life. As she arranged to meet the seller in the back alley of an abandoned shopping plaza, she couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that settled like a heavy blanket over her heart. The air was eerily still, the glow of streetlights barely making a dent in the consuming darkness. As she stepped into the alley, the comforting familiarity of Maplewood began to fade into something far more sinister. The stillness felt oppressive, almost suffocating. She strained her ears, catching the unsettling rustling of a plastic bag caught in the wind. A chill ran down her spine. Was someone watching? Her phone buzzed, nearly sending her heart into her throat. Just above the vibration she read the low battery warning. Of course. She couldn't help but rationalize every hint of danger. After all, the thought of Danny's smile soon eclipsed her fears. But then she heard a scrape. Footsteps. The air thickened like fog rolling in, and she froze. A figure stepped from the unforgiving shadows. A gaunt man in a ragged coat reached for her, his crooked smile sending icy fingers up her spine. In his arms, he hoisted mismatched toys that seemed disturbingly lifelike, crafted from materials that conjured dark images of a predatory nightmare. Panic constricted her throat as her instincts screamed to run. She barely managed a shout, her voice swallowed by the night, lost in the echo of the uncaring darkness. The man's grin widened, almost amused, as if he reveled in her fear. She could almost hear the whisper of menacing laughter coiling around her. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she stumbled back, her eyes darting for an escape, she realized the dark corners of the alley hid more than the artist's booby-trapped goodies. The shadows played tricks on her mind, conjuring a world where every friendly glance at the park, every wave from across the street, could be hiding someone just like him. A voice echoed deeper in the alley, but it wasn't the man before her. It was something more sinister, drawing her into a web of horror that could easily devour her. The smiles at the PTA meetings, were they all just masks of something vile? In this moment of profound realization, with every step backwards, her heart raced faster, pounding against her ribs like a caged animal desperate for freedom. What if this night marked the end of her fight? Panic clawed at her throat as the darkness loomed closer, wrapping her in a suffocating embrace. How could she ensure Danny's safety in a place where trust turned treacherous? Would she escape this twisted encounter, or would the truth of her suburban nightmare engulf her whole? Laura's breath hitched in her throat as she stumbled backward into the cold brick wall of the alley. Her pulse thundered in her ears, drowning out every shuffling sound, the crunch of leaves, the distant hum of traffic. The man before her didn't move, his smile was a sickening freeze frame, hanging in the oppressive air like carrion scenting the breeze. She turned on her heel, feeling the rough stone scrape against her back as she pressed harder against it, as if the wall could absorb her panic. The footsteps echoed again, louder, closer now, like a predator stalking its prey. The darkness shifted, closing in, and Laura felt a panic so intense it turned her vision blurry. Why are you doing this? She managed to stutter, her voice trembling. The man took a deliberate step forward, toys jingling with a sound reminiscent of frozen laughter. "It's not about that, dear," he said, his voice low and rasping, grating against the silence with a chilling familiarity. "It's about what you will give me in return." Laura's mind raced, desperately searching for a connection. What could he mean? But there were no friendly gestures, no smiling encounters, only shadows, only threats. Then she noticed another figure looming behind him, smaller yet equally unsettling. A child? But this one had glassy, unblinking eyes and a smile that looked far too wide for a face so small. It clutched an oddly mismatched teddy bear, its plush fur matted and blackened, as if it had lived through something unspeakable. "Mommy!" It called in a sing-song voice that felt wrong, echoing eerily in the narrow space. Her throat tightened at the sound, a visceral dread tearing through her. "Leave him alone!" She cried, but deep inside, she did not believe the words. If it was a child, it could only mean one thing: they were trapped, caught in a malicious game with no rules but theirs. The gaunt man took another step closer, and Laura's feet finally found some semblance of mobility. She spun around, sprinting towards the exit of the alley, her breath hitching as she stumbled over discarded litter and broken glass, each step a desperate drive to escape the nightmare looming behind her. "Don't run, Laura!" he taunted, childlike laughter echoing as if the shadows themselves were mocking her. She burst from the alley into the dimly lit lot, panic thrumming in her veins. But reality hit hard when a figure appeared unexpectedly in the parking lot. It was a woman, silhouetted against the flickering lights from the nearby store, her face obscured by shadows. "Please, help me!" Laura shouted, her voice raw, fear spilling forth. But as the woman stepped into the light, the realization crashed over her like ice water. The woman wore the same gaunt expression, her eyes reflecting the same unnatural gleam as the man. She stood ready, with toys in her hands. There was just a moment, a split second, when Laura's fight or flight instinct kicked in. The alley lurked behind her like a predator waiting to pounce, and its claws were sharp. "Join us, it will be so much fun," the woman crooned, her smile stretching wider, now impossibly distorted. In that moment, terror washed over Laura like a tidal wave. This wasn't just an encounter, it was a trap woven tight, and she was the prey. With the light around her dimming into shadows, Laura took off again, every footfall echoing in the growing silence, punctuated by a singular thought: what would she have to sacrifice to escape this nightmare? As the night deepened, she ran on, unable to shake the feeling that she was no longer just fleeing the dark but also heading deeper into it. What awaited her at the end of this twisted game? A new horror or a door to freedom? Laura's heart raced, pumping frantic adrenaline through her veins as she pushed herself harder. Each breath burned in her throat. Shadows twisted and danced around her, taunting her desperation. A low laugh echoed behind her, followed by the terrifying sound of rattling toys clinking, chiming like a ghostly wind chime, forever calling her back. She darted across the parking lot, the light flickering above her like a dying star. The woman's voice echoed in her ears: "It will be so much fun." And Laura swerved around a rusty car, misery clinging to her skin like the sweat of fear. But then she saw it, a door ajar ahead, leading into the building beyond. Hope flickered in her chest, igniting the primal instinct to survive. She flung herself toward it, praying the cursed darkness behind wouldn't reach her first. The doorknob twisted beneath her frantic fingertips, swinging open with an eerie creak. Beyond lay an empty hallway, dimly lit and lined with peeling wallpaper. She slipped inside, pressing the door shut gently but firmly, holding her breath. Silence enveloped her. The only sound was the pounding of her heart. She squinted into the gloom, straining to make out familiar shapes: a row of doors lined against the walls, a cracked mirror reflecting her terror-stricken face. Then she heard it, the soft shuffle of footsteps. They were close, too close. "Come out, Laura." The voice was a haunting whisper, curling around her like smoke. It oozed seduction and menace, the gaunt man's words reverberating in her mind. Suddenly every door seemed to hold a hidden menace. She jerked her head toward the rear of the hallway, where two doors stood side by side. One creaked slightly as though it were waiting for her to make a choice. "Choose." The voice sang, now maddeningly joyful. "Which door shall it be? The key to your freedom or your last moments?" Her throat tightened. She couldn't face him again. She couldn't bear the idea of a relentless smile and those empty eyes that followed her every move. Desperation filled her mind. She glanced at the first door, dread flooding her senses. And yet, the song "Mommy" echoed through her thoughts, taunting and cold, urging her not to take the bait, to pick the other. She swallowed, the lump in her throat like a stone. With a shaky breath, she turned to the second door, pushing it open slowly as it creaked in protest. The room beyond was a child's bedroom. Toys lay strewn about, each one facing her, their glassy eyes gleaming with predictions of horror. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of decay lingered. A nursery rhyme wafted down from a dusty old music box perched on a shelf. The melody was sweet, but it sent chills running down her spine. "Join us, we want you to stay." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, locking her inside. Panic surged as she lunged for the knob locked. Her breath quickened, a true fight against time. Those same footsteps reappeared outside, just out of sight. "No, please." The desperation clawed at her throat as she turned, frantically searching the room for better options. Scattered across the floor, odd plush toys watched. They were mere inanimate objects, but their presence felt alive, waiting. She caught sight of a window, her salvation. She rushed over, her hands trembling as she pushed against the frame, just as rhythmical jingling began to grow louder outside. Deep in her gut, she felt the shadows inch closer, like fingers of midnight reaching out, ready to snatch her back. Would this window lead her to safety, or further into an everlasting nightmare? In that moment, with fear almost overwhelming, she knew one thing: she had to choose quickly or become part of the dark world surrounding her. Would the toys speak? Would they whisper her secrets? What truly lay beyond that door? The echoes of their laughter drifted through the air as Laura made her choice, the haunting melody still echoing in her ears, a lullaby of despair, and she was still so very far from free. The window resisted, stuck shut like a dark secret. Laura's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a reminder that time was slipping away. The music box continued its haunting tune, casting a spell over the room, fogging her thoughts. "Join us, we want you to stay," it reverberated in her mind, twisting into a sickly sweet chant. She rammed her shoulder into the window frame, desperation fueling her strength, but it wouldn't budge. Outside, the laughter grew louder, an echoing symphony of cruel delight. It felt like the toys were watching her with hungry eyes, each one waiting for the moment she would falter, for the moment they could claim her. "Go back to sleep," they seemed to whisper, the soft rustling now betraying a potent urge to silence her cries. Another slam against the door sent jolts of terror coursing through her. The doorknob rattled violently, a thin line between her and the abyss outside. She whirled around, breathless, scanning for an escape. In the corner of the room, a closet door stood slightly ajar, dark and inviting. Could it hide hope or doom? Laura's instincts screamed at her to run, but her feet felt glued to the floor as the tunes escalated into a chaotic mix of childish giggles and mournful wails, clamoring for her attention. "Time's up. Time to play." A voice chanted in mock innocence. "No!" She shrieked, the sound tearing from her throat. With a surge of clarity, Laura dashed for the closet, pushing the door wide. It was cramped inside, filled with the scent of mildew and something sweetly foul. She rummaged rapidly, searching for a way out, but the darkness seemed to swallow her whole. Nothing but old clothes hung limply around her, trapping her in a curtain of fabric, as if they dreamed of dragging her into oblivion. The footsteps grew louder, now pounding against the door, each thud echoing the drum of her heart. A primal fear gripped her, she was torn between the longing for freedom and the freezing dread of her impending doom. Suddenly, she spotted a glimmering object tucked in the corner beneath the coats. She reached down, fingers brushing against something cool and metallic. A key? Hope rushed through her veins, igniting her will to escape. The joy was intoxicating, but it quickly twisted into panic as the closet door shook under a violent assault. "Open up. We want to play." The voice had shifted now, a seething urgency laced with a hunger for her fear. Laura clutched the key tightly, heart racing wildly as she emerged from the closet, not caring if it splintered the door open with her weight. Adrenaline fueled her forward. She sprinted to the bedroom door, thrusting the key into the lock, fingers fumbling with dread. With one swift turn, the door clicked open. But what lay beyond chilled her to the bone. The hallway had changed. The walls seemed to pulse, resettling as if they were alive, twisting shadows creeping closer, slick like oil. "No, no," she whimpered, retreating reflexively. There was no time to think as the oppressive laughter bloomed, engulfing her completely. She could see the outline of a figure at the end of the hall, motionless yet pulsating with menace. A malevolent grin slashed across its features. "Come play with us, Laura. Just one more game," it beckoned, voice dancing over the air like flames licking at her skin. She turned back to the room, throat tight with panic. Where to go? The toys in the room seemed to beckon her once more, promising comfort, security, a form of twisted safety she couldn't comprehend. But what if this was the beginning of a new nightmare? The key clutched in her fist trembled as new thoughts invaded. What if she wasn't meant to escape after all? With a deep breath, she gripped the key tighter. "I have to try," she whispered to herself, ready to face whatever horror awaited her ahead. But as she took a single step forward, a soft chuckle traveled through the hall, freezing her in place. "But what if you're already too late?" As the shadows danced, the figure nodded knowingly, and Laura's heart sank deeper into despair. Her journey was only just beginning. The shadows writhed along the walls, whispering secrets she could not understand. Laura's feet felt heavy, the weight of the invisible forces threatening to pull her back into the darkness. The figure at the end of the hall took a single step forward, its smile stretching, revealing a mouth far too wide, its teeth sharp like shards of glass. "Time to join the fun," it crooned, voice dripping with malice, wrapping around her like a cold embrace. Laura stumbled back into the room, desperate to close the door and lock out the nightmare. But the door slammed before she could touch the handle, bouncing back with an ominous thud. Panic ignited inside her, fueling her need to escape. She turned, desperate eyes scanning the room. The music box sat in silence, but she could still hear the echoes of its beckoning tune dancing on the edges of her mind. No! She wouldn't let them take her. The toys remained, unmoving but unblinking, their varnished eyes glinting like dark sapphires, suggesting something sinister beneath their painted surfaces. "Join us," they chorused, soft and soothing, but the undercurrent of their voices made her skin crawl. She backed up into the closet again, heart hammering wildly. The key glimmered in her palm, seeming out of place against the suffocating dread surrounding her. What had she unlocked? Had it been a door to freedom or a portal to eternal torment? She couldn't waste time second-guessing. "Just one more game," the figure's voice echoed down the hall, closer now, heavy footsteps reverberating like a warped drumbeat. In that moment, realization slammed into her. This was no mere game. It was a trap, a ritual to ensnare her spirit, to draw her into their sinister world of twisted playtime. Laura pressed her back against the cold wall of the closet, breathing in shallow gasps. She had to think. She needed a plan. She glanced around and noticed a small window near the back of the room, too small for even a child to fit through, but it might offer a sliver of daylight, a chance to signal for help. A feeble hope sparked in her chest. Suddenly, the door began to tremble under the weight of the figure's force, a deep growl issuing from its throat, resonating with the wood, sending shockwaves through her body. Let us play, Laura. We've waited too long. It howled, rage lacing the words, twisting her name into something grotesque. Without thinking, she bolted back towards the window but paused, glancing back at the closet. A shadow shifted just inside, like a lure, promising yet again to keep her safe. But the key pulsed in her grip, urging her to take the leap rather than to hide. She clenched her jaw, made her choice no more hiding. Let us see what you've been hiding all these years, she muttered to herself as she forced the window open, pushing against the grime and rust that resisted her. The laughter escalated, reaching a fever pitch. The figure burst through the door with startling speed, a whirlwind of malice and chaos. Its eyes glowed with triumph, eager to claim its prize. As Laura slipped halfway through the window, the creature's cold fingers grazed her ankle, a jolt of ice coursing through her body. She gasped and pulled harder, the world outside promising freedom but the shadows inside begged her to return. Come back, Laura. The game's not over. With one last heave, she broke free, tumbling out into the sharp sunlight that blinded her. But the laughter chased her, lingering in the air, a reminder that the game was far from finished. And the key, what had it truly unlocked? As Laura scrambled to her feet, breath fogging the air around her, she felt an unsettling chill. She wasn't safe yet. The talent for terror was still waiting, lurking in the shadows, reminding her, you can leave, but you can never escape. The road ahead shimmered with fear as she took off, heart racing, not knowing who or what would come after her next. Would the figure follow? Had she truly unlocked her last chance, or just released a tide of horrors yet to come? In that moment of uncertain freedom, dread gripped her as she realized. Somehow, they would always know where to find her. Laura sprinted down the cracked sidewalk, the scorching sun beating down on her, but it was the chill creeping along her spine that froze her blood. She could still hear the laughter, that mocking cackle echoing in her ears, an unwelcome reminder that she was not alone. Each footfall on the pavement felt like a countdown, counting down to the moment the figure would emerge from the shadows, clawing at her sanity. Keep running, she whispered to herself, but doubt twisted in her mind. What if it was already too late? What if the figure had seeped into her very essence? Intense panic surged, and with it, the urge to look back. But she resisted, forcing her legs to move faster, her breath sharp and ragged. Crossing the street, she made her way into a narrow alley, slick with grime and littered with forgotten memories. The walls pressed inward, narrowing her escape. Her heart raced, each pounding beat echoing against the bricks, a frantic rhythm in line with her growing dread. Help! She called out, but her voice sounded weak, swallowed by the emptiness around her. She felt exposed, like prey in the presence of a hunter lurking just out of sight. Rounding a corner, she stumbled upon an old, rusted gate. Desperation tugged at her sometimes, isolation was safer than the open road. She whirled around, pressing herself against the cold iron, ready for whatever might come. And then she saw it. A flickering light ahead, spilling from a doorway ajar, a dim beacon that beckoned. But as she inched closer, the laughter swelled again behind her, louder this time, worming its way into her mind. We're waiting for you, Laura. The echo was unmistakably closer, tinged with that insatiable hunger. Without thinking, she flung open the gate and dashed inside. The door clicked shut behind her like a snare set to trap her within. Heart pounding, Laura examined her surroundings. It was a cramped, forgotten room, filled with dust-covered antiques that stood like sentinels of forgotten times. Old chairs, an overturned rocking horse, each piece seemed to stare back, shrouded with malevolence. On the far wall, she spotted a chipped mirror. Shadows flickered in its surface, something stirred, out of reach yet unnervingly familiar. She stepped closer. The reflection stared back, but it wasn't just her, it was the figure, its wide smile somehow blending with her own features, a grotesque union, drawing her in. No! She gasped, recoiling as despair swallowed her. The reflection twisted, flailing, desperately trying to break free. She turned away, searching the room for an escape, but every corner closed in tighter. "Let me in," the reflection wailed, a chorus of voices trapped in agony. "We are one now, Laura. Join us." She pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the mirror, the chill seeping into her skin. Memories flooded her of laughter, childhood games, a music box, the shrill sound of toys whispering her name. Everything about her past now seemed tainted, a facade masking the reality that had come crashing in. Which Laura was real? The one escaping or the one trapped? Suddenly, the lights flickered dangerously, and in its brief dance, she saw dark shapes creeping along the walls, drawing closer, reaching for her. Panic surged again, and she took a step back, heart racing. A doorway opened behind her, and a voice called softly, "Laura." It was laced with familiarity but edged with something sinister. "No!" she screamed, scrambling towards the exit. Yet, that familiar laughter flooded her ears once more, inviting, taunting. Her feet wouldn't move. The darkness twisted, the light flickered. Despair enveloped her, wrapping around her throat like a noose. Would she join them? Would she lose herself to the past? The shadows lunged toward her, and in that moment of terror, she realized the truth: the figure had already won. A sudden crash echoed through the room, breaking the paralysis of dread. The door splintered, and a pair of grotesquely familiar hands reached through the opening, a twisted invitation to play once more. And then there was silence. Nearing the edge of pure horror. What would happen next? Would she reclaim her identity or surrender to the game forever? The door burst open, shards of splintered wood flying into the cramped room. The air thickened with an electric tension. Laura's heart thudded violently against her ribcage as the hands reached through, clawing at the remnants of her fragile sanity. She spiraled deeper into panic. "Run!" An urgent voice shouted from within, echoing the dread in her mind. But the sound grew faint, lost in the wave of laughter that consumed her. The grotesque hands clawed painfully, fingers bent in unnatural angles, their movements jerky yet deliberate. It was like watching a nightmare unfold, a scene she'd never wanted to witness. "Laura," the voice moaned again, this time more insistent, a cruel mimicry wrapped in familiarity. It danced around her, making her skin crawl. Each syllable threatened to peel away her thoughts, layer by layer. Frantic, she darted toward the opposite side of the room. Shadows flitted around her like dark phantoms, whispering her name in a chilling cacophony, a chorus of doom that promised her an inescapable fate. She felt cold beads of sweat trickle down her back, transforming the stifling air into a dense fog of terror. As if sensing her desperation, the dark shapes morphed into forms resembling faces from her past, old friends, relatives, each one a fragment of her childhood. "Join us, Laura," they pleaded, their eyes hollow, expressionless. It was a perverse reunion, a grotesque display of all she had tried to escape. Then, from the corner of her eye, she spotted a flickering candle on a precarious end table. Its flame danced fiercely, as if alive, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny spirits in despair. The candle spoke to her, a flicker of hope amidst the engulfing darkness. Could it hold the answer she so desperately sought? She lunged for the candle, seized it, and turned back towards the mirror, the only other reflection remaining in the room. The grotesque figures lunged forward, their laughter vile and triumphant. What would she find if she lit the candle? Would it dispel the shadows, or would it draw her deeper into their grasp? "Let me out!" she screamed, the desperation in her voice a raw edge of fear. But the shadows only writhed, drawing nearer, their laughter morphing into a symphony of her own past regrets. Then, a familiar face lit up in the shadows, her own. Staring back at her from the mirror with that wicked, twisted smile. "You know you want to join us," it hissed. The figure lifted a hand, and she flinched, anticipating a cold touch that would seal her doom. Just as the shadows seemed ready to consume her, a blinding light enveloped the room. Laura shielded her eyes, blinded by the sudden brilliance. The candle. Its flame sparked brightly, illuminating every corner, and the whispers turned to shrieks. The faces recoiled, melting away into the darkness, their power forfeited by the fire. With renewed clarity, she darted toward the door, pushing against the cold wood. It groaned in protest but reluctantly opened. She stumbled out, heart racing, the laughter now mixed with frantic cries of unbelieving horror. Breathless, she found herself back in the alley where it had all begun, but something had changed. The street was eerily quiet. Had they been banished? Or was this silence just the calm before a more terrible storm? Her pulse quickened, apprehension creeping back in. A sense of dread hung heavy in the air. What were they? Laura breathed, mind racing, her eyes darting around for shadows. The laughter had transformed into haunting echoes, reverberating from somewhere within the depths of her past. Shadows shifted at the edge of her vision, darting between the buildings, the promise of what could still come back. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. Each step forward beckoned new terrors, but she couldn't run anymore. Somewhere out there, they waited for her. What would be the price for her freedom? Would the secrets of her past come back to claim her once more? The stillness was suffocating, like a thick blanket wrapped too tightly around her. Laura stepped cautiously into the alley, each echoing footfall like a drumbeat of dread. Time stretched, warped by her anxiety. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, taunting her with promises of what lay just beyond her perception. They whispered in those familiar tones, reminding her that they were never truly gone. She turned abruptly, scanning the blackened corners of the alley. "Show yourselves!" she shouted, desperation weaving through her voice. Silence was her answer, as chilling as the void beneath her skin. Her heart hammered, each beat resonating with the rhythm of an inescapable truth. They were there, lurking, out of reach yet always present. Suddenly, the ground beneath her trembled. A low rumble surged through the alley, reverberating through her bones. It felt alive, as if the very foundation of reality strained to contain the darkness creeping back into her world. Laura's breath caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. Was this the aftermath of her escape, or simply a new haunt? Just then, the air crackled around her. A flicker of movement tugged her gaze to the right. It was there, a face flashing like a strobe light, a grotesque contortion of the past emerging from a blackened doorway. She recognized him instantly, a friend from her childhood, long since lost to her. "Laura," he whispered, his voice warped, as if struggling against a tide of darkness. "You left us. Why?" "No." She gasped, shaking her head violently. "You're not real." But doubt seeped into her resolve. Was she merely seeing what she wished to forget, or confronting a much darker truth? Without thinking, she sprinted down the alley, desperation pushing her forward. Each step shook loose more memories, each shadow a reminder of her haunted past. She pressed on, fueled by instinct, the faint glow of hope flickering like the candle's flame back in that dreadful room. Yet, every corner felt like a trap, every movement warped by her panic. The laughter grew louder, spilling from the shadows and intertwining with the rhythmic pounding of her heart. "You can't escape us," they echoed, their voices merging into a dissonant symphony of torment. Laura skidded to a stop at an intersection. The alley morphed into a labyrinth of twisting paths. A chill swept through her, whispering threats of what awaited her in each direction. She looked back, fearing the laughter would consume her. "Where are you?" she cried out into the empty air. "What do you want from me?" A moment of eerie silence followed. Then, from the silence, a singular voice rose, cold and dripping with malice. "To remind you, Laura. To remind you that freedom has its price." Her mind raced, desperate for answers, marred by guilt and regret. Images flashed the faces of her past, their eyes blackened with sorrow and anger. Had they always yearned for her return? Were they the shadows that emerged when the light faded? The realization crept like ice through her veins. Before she could process any further, a low groan erupted from the walls around her. The building seemed to shift, leaning as if eager to listen in on her unraveling sanity. Panic clawed at her chest as she stumbled backward, realizing she was trapped, suspended between shadows and fate. And then she heard it, a soft clink, echoing like a death toll. A flicker of something metallic caught her eye, reflecting the chaotic light above. It lay just beyond her reach, gleaming with a promise of hope or doom. Laura stepped forward, the dread coiling tighter in her gut. What awaited her in that glimmer was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the shadows would not let her go easily. As her trembling fingers grasped the object, a sinister whisper wrapped around her, pulling her into the depths of what she had sought to escape. "Welcome back," they hissed, the shadows closing in. What darkness loomed ahead? Was this truly the end of her struggle, or merely the beginning of a deeper nightmare? With a jolt, the cold metal object slipped from her grasp. It clattered to the ground, sending a sharp echo into the thick silence of the alley. The flickering shadows paused, drawn to the sound like moths to a flame. Panic ignited in Laura's chest as she knelt to retrieve it, her fingers grazing the chilly surface. It was a small mirror, the glass mottled and cracked, reflecting not just her face but a deeper echo of despair. From its depths, those shadows emerged like a long-forgotten horror. Faces twisted by time and anguish stared back at her, mouths agape in silent screams, their eyes swirling with darkness. "No, no!" She stumbled backward, her breath coming out in ragged gasps. The alley warped around her, pulsating with the energy of a living nightmare. She had always avoided mirrors after the accident; they became portals of her guilt, reminders of what had been lost. But this wasn't just a mirror, it was a doorway. Her heart thumped violently. "If you're real, then you can help me," she pleaded, desperation clawing at the edges of her sanity. The shadows seemed to chuckle, a low, mocking sound that echoed around her. "Help you?" A voice sneered, rasping through the air like shattered glass. "We're the truth you've hidden from, the memories you wished would fade. You cannot escape us, Laura." A chill coursed through her veins as terror gripped her. They were fragments of her past, the faces of friends and loved ones. All those she had abandoned, all those she had lost in her desperate flight from the truth. They were shadows now, but they'd once been flesh and blood, vibrant with life. "Leave me alone," she screamed, confusion twisting her emotions into a frantic knot. But the laughter grew in volume, shifting into a cacophony of despair, drowning her cries. She could feel it then, something icy wrapping around her ankles, pulling her down. It was the alley itself, seeming to warp, dragging her into its depths. The walls stretched outward, encasing her in a suffocating grip that tightened with every frantic breath. She began to kick and claw, the echo of her struggles resonating through the void. "Let me go. I didn't mean to," but her words shattered into the darkness, drowned out by the relentless whispering of the shadows. Suddenly, the ground quaked again, more violently this time. Cracks splintered the pavement beneath her, fissures that widened like gaping mouths ready to swallow her whole. She closed her eyes, metal taste flooding her senses, ready to lose herself in the void. But then it stopped. A breath of stillness enveloped her, as if the world paused, waiting. Heart pounding, she opened her eyes, feeling the oppressive darkness pressing down. "What now?" she whispered, fearful of the answer. From the cracks emerged a low glow, seeping warmth that starkly contrasted with the ice in her veins. She knew she had to move, yet fear held her in place, dormant like a lurking predator. Her instincts screamed for her to flee, but the pull of the mirror, the shadows, and the promise of the unknown was too strong. With trembling steps, she approached the mirror, its surface alive with chaotic colors, swirling shapes of faces she knew too well. A hand reached out from the depths, seemingly beckoning her to join them. "Join us, Laura," they intoned, the choir of voices sweet yet sinister. "You can't fight what you truly are." The darkness tightened its grip, and she felt herself teeter on the edge of despair. What if she couldn't fight them? What if joining them was her only salvation? The thought curled in her mind, smothering her hope. Then, just as she felt herself hesitating, the mirror cracked again, sending a spider web of light across the entire alley. It shimmered for an instant, a salvation or a trap. In that moment, she had a decision to make, but as the shadows lunged, tipping the balance, the choice slipped from her grasp. What awaited her on the other side? Could it be the relief of finally confronting her buried past, or would the depths claim her forever? Laura stood at the cusp of the cracked mirror, feeling its cold glimmer beckon her closer. The shadows shivered with anticipation, whispering sweet nothings that twisted into reverberating taunts. "Join us," they coaxed, their voices merging into an alluring hymn that threatened to pull at her very soul. "No!" she shouted, summoning strength she didn't know she had. "You don't own me anymore." Fueled by defiance, she lunged toward the glowing crack, where light splintered through, illuminating her darkened path ahead. Desperation coursed through her veins like fire as she reached for the mirror, her fingers trembling. The shadows surged, a chaotic wave, howling in anger. "You cannot escape what you are, Laura. You were always meant to belong with us." Her heart hammered, drowning out their cries. What if they were right? What if this was the truth she had been avoiding all this time? The thrill of fear collided with the weight of her memories, shifting her resolve like sand. But deep inside, a fierce spark ignited. No matter how twisted and horrifying, her memories were hers. They didn't define her purpose or her path forward. She could acknowledge them but also forge ahead, refusing to be shackled by regret. With a guttural scream, she thrust her hand into the mirror, shattering its glass as the light exploded around her, casting away the shadows and their haunting laughter. The world around her spun violently, colors melting into chaos before snapping back with blinding clarity. She found herself standing in the empty alley, sunlight pouring down to replace the consuming dark of the night before. Reality returned to her in a rush, a fresh breath filling her lungs. For a moment, she thought she might have escaped. Then she heard it again, the laughter, lingering at the edges of her sanity. "Foolish girl. You think you're free?" they hissed, creeping from nowhere, setting her skin alight with dread. "No!" she cried out, astonished by a sudden swelling of courage. She turned her back on the memories, the illusions, and the shadows coiling like a serpent at her feet. "I won't be yours anymore." Her voice rang through the stillness, defiant, strong. Something shifted in the air. The shadows receded, their cries turning to wails of confusion. "Go back to sleep," they whimpered, clinging to the darkness that began to dissolve. Stepping forward, she left the alley, leaving behind the oppressive nightmare. The sun was blinding, a symbol of her awakening. With every step onto the open sidewalk, she felt a burden lift. This was her life, her choice. The street buzzed with life, the soft hum of ordinary chatter and laughter blending into an evocative symphony that soothed her spirit. As she ventured further, coffee shops and children laughing echoed around her. Hers was no longer a world shadowed by horror. "Danny," she whispered, pulling herself back into her true purpose. She had fought for her son, had fought for herself. She didn't merely want to escape, she wanted a new beginning, both for herself and for him. The laughter faded into whispers, swallowed by the vibrant pulse of life around her. The darkness that clung to her faded gradually, swallowed by light and warmth. She had chosen her path, faced the shadows of her past, and emerged whole again. As she rounded the corner, she spotted Danny, his laughter breaking through the din as he wheeled his new bicycle, a bright smile lighting up his face. In that moment, everything clicked into place. "Mommy!" he called out, arms open wide. Her heart soared, a sense of liberation flooding her being. She crouched and opened her arms, the purest joy enveloping her. "I'm here, buddy." She breathed, relief flooding her voice. The shadows could linger, but they would hold no power over her or her life anymore. They embraced, and Laura knew this was her true victory. She turned her gaze back toward the alley one last time, a promise igniting within her. She wouldn't be defined by fear, and she would never forget, but she would choose to live beyond it. With renewed determination, she walked forward with Danny by her side, ready to leave behind the horrors of the past, knowing she was finally free. And as the sun dipped softly below the horizon, the shadows shrank back into their corners, whispering only to themselves, forever waiting for another soul to ensnare. Laura had won this round, and she was done playing their twisted game. Join her journey of survival and growth. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss our next stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button because it truly supports the channel. Flood the comments with your thoughts and theories, we want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this thrilling conclusion. This is the moment to show your support.